phone they had access to over there. So you don't know what you're talking about. You're just
Senator
making
Rosen,
stuff up.
he has the floor.
I know your staff wrote up this cute statement for your TikTok video, but it's not true, and it's not real. That's not what happened. Okay, I'm the National Security Advisor and Secretary of State. I was co-located with the President in the midst of a high-stakes negotiation so that I could immediately inform him about events occurring halfway around the world. I was where I needed to be at that moment because we had a very capable team on the ground in Pakistan, led by the Vice President. Visualized it. That was diplomacy.
That's great, but the Trump administration has still blown through more money in 14 weeks.
Do I get to talk to
this entire budget that you're requesting?
Senator Duckworth, I'm going to let Senator Rubio reply to the statements that you made at his request.
Yeah, that's.
But we've got a hard stop at 12:30.
Okay, but I know, but you said a lot of stuff. I get to answer some of it. All right. So the first is the second is India-Pakistan. We ended that war. We were involved in helping broker that. Thailand, Cambodia. That's diplomacy. We've been very engaged in fact, as I sit here now speaking to you, I've got the Lebanese government and the Israeli government meeting at the State Department starting at 8:30 this morning for the 4th time after engaging last week at the military level. So we're carrying out now, we're carrying out diplomacy all over the world constantly and very successfully in many cases. Now, let me make one more point that you raised about the budget request. Guys, we understand how this process works, okay? You guys understand. I know because I've been involved all the time. We OMB, produces sort of timelines for every agency. We put forward a budget. We say,
I'd like to remind the American people that as the Secretary of State, your main duty as America's chief diplomat is to maintain our relations with foreign nations. This is why I was shocked to see that you were at a party with President Trump in Miami instead of accompanying Vice President Vance to Pakistan for negotiations.
What party was I at? I was at a party?
It's publicly reported, and there's photos there.
But what party? No, but you're going to say that. I'm going to answer it. I'm going to answer that question because that's an absurd statement. I was not at a party.
Finish my paragraph, he can answer.
People are going to slander me. I'm going to answer it.
Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, both of whom were never confirmed by this body to be America's diplomats, accompanied the vice president in the negotiations. Even Iran's foreign minister was not there, yet you were not, was there, excuse me, and you were not. I just feel that's embarrassing for us, and it's embarrassing for you. So, Mr. Secretary, Congress represents the American people. We have the power to confirm who represents America abroad. We confirmed you to be our Secretary of State. We confirmed you to be in the negotiations that are happening. And it's just unthinkable to me that you are missing high-stakes negotiations or that you're not involved. It's sad.
Senator Rosen, your time's up.
But so let me
Secretary Rubio.
You're 100% inaccurate and 100% wrong. Here's why. Number one, the Vice President of the United States was there, and he wasn't confirmed by us, and he was elected by the American people. Okay? He is the second in line of the presidency of the United States. He was president. Mr. Witkoff is the president's envoy for negotiation for peace deals. Mr. Kushner is a private citizen that serves as an advisor on these functions. They were the team that we sent to Pakistan. I was not at a party. Where I was is next to the president. Because in the midst of those negotiations, I was in communications with them. And in fact, I think there is media reporting from that evening on how on multiple occasions I went into a back room, I came back out and spoke to the president and was constantly updating him. On that evening, I spoke to Mr. Kushner and our negotiating team and Mr. Witkoff on at least 6 occasions, including twice on a secure line from the phone they had access to over there. So you don't know what you're talking about. You're just
Senator
making stuff
Rosen,
up.
he has the floor.
I know your staff wrote up this cute statement for your TikTok video, but it's not true and it's not real. That's not what happened. Okay, I'm the National Security Advisor and Secretary of State. I was co-located with the President in the midst of a high-stakes negotiation so that I could immediately inform him about events occurring halfway around the world. I was where I needed to be at that moment because we had a very capable team on the ground in Pakistan, led by the Vice President of the United States.
Thank you very much. Mr. Secretary, you and I talked a lot about Africa, and I raised concerns about a lot of the cuts. We're seeing globally an increase in tuberculosis, an increase in malaria cases. We see a continued ongoing on the continent HIV crisis. And the United States has pulled back from a lot of its investments in those areas. Now with the crisis with Ebola, we see that the challenges that have been brought about as a result of our surveillance, early detection, and the like. So I'm just very concerned about what the administration's strategy is, because we're clearly seeing here that what goes on the continent of Africa directly affects our public health as well.
Well, first of all, I don't agree with that assessment. I mean, first of all, it's not about cutting back. The response here is not just how much money you spend, it's what results you're going to get. Now, let's talk about Ebola for a second. Ebola, the outbreak in Ebola was in a war-torn, isolated rural area in the DRC. That's where that began. Since that time, our response has been very quick. very rapid.
Well, so you're saying you did not cut early detection, Pierce? I'm not talking.
I'm saying that whatever you're pointing to as the cut is not the reason why there was an Ebola outbreak.
I'm not connecting the two. I'm simply saying.
Well, you are connecting them. You said that our cuts.
Senator Rubio, I'm not trying to get in an argument with you. I would really like to actually have my questions answered. So very quickly, we cut early detection when it comes to infectious diseases on the continent. Factually, this is not an opinion. We made those cuts. We cut early warning systems on the continent.
It had nothing to do with the Ebola outbreak.
So I don't need to tell you, Secretary Rubio, that we're living in a place where an infectious disease crisis anywhere is a threat to public health everywhere. The United States has made major reductions in these areas that have put us more at risk. If you're talking about this clearly Ebola crisis, there's other things and other cuts we've made, and you see it factually. Even our own State Department personnel that I've talked to are saying we're less prepared for a global outbreak than we were before. And my worry is, specifically in a budget hearing, is this budget makes even deeper cuts into the kind of things that could prevent the next outbreak, or, as we've seen with unfortunately with COVID, have us more prepared.
Yeah, I don't agree with that assessment. I don't know who told you that at the State Department. So just
let's
as an
move on.
example,
My time is limited.
I know, but that's an important question. I don't want to eat up your time, but
No,
I need to answer that because I just don't agree with that.
Mr. Secretary, you can't even agree on the facts.
Because that's not accurate. I mean, again, you look at what we've entered into.
It's not accurate that we cut early detection.
Because those have all been repurposed in different arrangements that we now have with these countries. As an example, when
I would like, for the record, because we're not going to cover it in my short time, if you're telling me we are as prepared or more prepared before the Trump administration came in, I'd like to see the facts.
I think when these reforms are finalized, which we're on the verge of doing, we're actually going to be better prepared. We are responding today faster, not just to humanitarian crisis, but to outbreaks than we were before. We are responding in some cases within 72 hours, are able to move funds to task, which you weren't able to do in the old system. And we're also building the capacity
Mr. Secretary,
Mr.
Secretary, may I please reclaim my time to shift gears? The Strait of Hormuz, I was listening to the conversations you had with some of my colleagues. We've now seen the Strait close for months, and you explained that we're going to see an opening of the Strait, and that ultimately the exchange we will get for that is, after that fact, we will release certain sanctions. Is that correct?
No, that's not what I said. What I said was that if they open the Straits, we will lift our blockade. The Straits and the blockade are what are interrelated.
And so for the nuclear program, in exchange for getting rid of the fissile material out of country, I imagine, is what the highly enriched uranium, we would release sanctions. Is that correct?
Well, it's not just that. It's also their enrichment activity. They would have to, they would have to make very severe and significant concessions on what they intend to enrich in the future.
And already with the March relaxing of sanctions, allowing Iranians to sell oil to the Chinese, estimates have been between $10 and $50 billion they got from that relaxing of sanctions. How much money might we see in a deal in our relaxings of sanctions in order to get rid of the highly enriched uranium and stop their enrichment?
Well, let me just tell you on that portion. The sanctions that were released on Iran were boats on the water. And so that oil was already out in the marketplace. It was sold at market rates, but the sanctions covered, and to the extent we've been able to enforce them, we have the revenues of those sales. So yeah, the Iranian oil was unsanctioned so that it could be sold, but the revenue would have to flow back to block the counts, which our sanctions were able to go after. We've also seized, I believe, 6 vessels in the Indo-Pacific that involved Iranian sanctioned oil on top of it. So that wasn't necessarily a trade. They didn't get $50 billion directly as a result of. They might have gotten some of it. They certainly didn't get the majority of it. They are now losing hundreds of millions of dollars a day in revenue because of the blockade. And the blockade exists because of what they're doing in the Straits.
Right, and I guess the conclusion I have, and my time's expired, is that the Strait of Hormuz was open before this unjustified war. We're now scrambling to try to find a way to get it back opened again. Not only is it causing economic havoc to our country and to residents all around this nation, families trying to make ends meet, but you see on top of that, the Iranians finding ways to leverage that, as we allowed them to do with the Chinese for tens of billions of dollars. And so my point is, before we even get to a nuclear negotiation, this regime is getting money to rebuild, purchase more drones, cause more havoc. And this is before we're even trying to get back to.
But I apologize. I don't understand how they're getting this. What revenue are you referring to?
Well, there's 2 sources of revenue we're seeing. One is the revenue from the Chinese, that's factually documented. And number 2, the revenue that you're proposing that they should receive by releasing all of their highly enriched uranium as well as in making a commitment about their enrichment capacities.
Yeah.
Hold on. And that was the exact deal that you guys vilified, that the president and you vilified President Obama from having.
Yeah. No,
So
I don't
here we
think those
have
are not
a
the
worse situation where
Those are not the same
where our
things.
adversary and our enemy, who's causing havoc in the region, who is funding proxies and terrorists, has discovered, thanks to you all, the power of shutting down the Strait of Hormuz.
No, they didn't
which
discover.
is
They
wha-
knew that a long time ago, and they've done it before.
Clearly, we all knew that a long time ago. That's why this
And they intended to do this at
ill-conceived
some point
war
in the
should have
future
never
as well.
happened.
Yeah,
but
but
have made our adversary in a stronger negotiating position. We are the strongest nation on the planet Earth, and we're in a stalemate with Iran. And now we're begging to get back into a deal that you all
We're not
trashed in
begging.
the first place.
there's no one begging. I don't
Clearly,
know.
this is a
Senator
shame.
Senator Booker, your time's up.
But can
Senator
I just-
Rubio, since he's
I do
fallen
want to
over, you
address
can
some of these points
respond.
because they go to the heart of the matter. No one's begging for anything here. The Iranians might be begging because their economy's losing hundreds of millions of dollars a day. That they are losing. Understand, Iran had street protests going on before all of this started. All of those factors, economic factors in Iran, are far worse today than they were 6 months ago when those protests were happening. They have hyperinflation. Their currency's completely devalued. They're struggling to make payroll for their government workers. Iran is in a very serious situation. And if it was up to the political class there, and I understand everybody there is sort of radical in some way, but if it was up to the people that actually like go to elections and wear the suits and you see on, it's the issue they're facing is that the supreme leader and the IRGC Corps are a little bit more immune from those pressures until they can be convinced otherwise. And I think that's the direction that they're moving in, because the reality, I don't know where you're getting this perception that Iran is stronger. Iran has no navy left. They've lost a substantial percentage of their defense industrial base. That Iran has lost a substantial percentage of their missile launchers, and their economy is far worse today, and I mean far worse today than it was 6 to 9 months ago. And they are looking at hundreds of billions of dollars of reconstruction costs just to get to where they were 6 months
Mr. Rubio, you keep telling us how we're winning this war. The president keeps saying,
Well, the war's over
completely
now.
annihilated. The war is not over. And yet the American people see how we're losing at the pump and with their costs, and yet this thing still hasn't been resolved. Every day he tweets out, oh, we've obliterated them, we've annihilated them, they're going to surrender. But yet we still find ourselves spending billions of dollars a week
Yeah, Senator
on
Booker,
war abroad.
you've gone way over. And
It would be nice if we had hearings where people
Thank
had to
you,
be held
Senator
accountable.
Booker. Senator Scott.
Mr. Secretary, you also wear the hat of a national security advisor. So with both that hat and as Secretary of State, do you agree that this administration has spent more on Trump's war in Iran than you are requesting today for this entire State Department budget request?
Yeah, I can't speak to the Department of War. Would have to speak to you about the money and what they calculate are the costs. I can't give you an accurate answer on that because that's
Okay.
not the thing that I look at.
I would think you would have some insight because you are on national security.
Well, I've
advisor
seen the
also.
testimony that Secretary Hegseth and others have conducted in front of their oversight committees, but I just can't. I don't want to give you an answer that's not accurate.
Okay.
So.
Well, this week, let me put out some numbers that I have. This week, the cost of President Trump's illegal war choice against Iran are likely to balloon past $35 billion by the rate from DOD's own May calculations, and surpass your FY 2027 budget request of $35.1 billion for the State Department and related programs. That's an astonishing figure, worth repeating. In just 14 weeks, President Trump will have blown through as much, if not more, money in Iran than he thinks Congress should spend on U.S. diplomacy for the entirety of the next fiscal year. This administration's distorted priorities have unfortunately revealed some stark lessons for our allies and partners as well. The United States' use of force first will make them less secure, as they'll be caught in the crossfire, left scrambling to protect themselves and their people. Mr. Secretary, do you agree that under Operation Epic Fury, our allies and partners in the region have expressed concern about their security and the threats that followed from this administration's uncoordinated actions?
No, I think our allies in the region have been very cooperative. Some obviously very aggressively cooperative, like the UAE as an example. Kuwait's been fantastic. Obviously, no country likes to have their oil and their energy infrastructure hit, but I think it's a reminder to them of the threat that Iran poses. And the one lesson when this is all said and done is it's reminded them of, despite all the friendly talk that you've seen in the past, how dangerous Iran is to their own interests, how the billions of dollars Iran has spent, despite sanctions. Iran found the money to build drones and rockets. Okay. And luckily, we've taken a lot of them out, but they still have some, and they still have the ability to launch
My question is about our allies in the region expressing concerns, because, you see, public reporting in early May revealed that Saudi Arabia denied U.S. basing and overflight related to Trump's ill-conceived plan to escort ships through the Straits of Hormuz, and they're still not supportive of this risky tanker escort plan, and the Strait is still worse off today than it was before Trump initiated this war. And that doesn't even touch on
Yeah, we
the
don't
wider
face any-
global lessons being learned by our allies and partners.
Yeah, we
I
don't
just came
face
home
any-
from the
any-
Shangri-La dialogue, where I heard from folks across the Indo-Pacific and especially in Southeast Asia who are being hit hard by the same rising energy costs that are devastating American communities. And frankly, this administration insists on using military force as a first resort instead of a last resort, no matter the deadly cost of self-defeating impacts. Your budget request here would sadly perpetuate that trend and undermine the roles and responsibilities that you should be fulfilling as Secretary
can
of
I-
State. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Okay, 'cause I didn't get to answer any of that.
I didn't ask you a
response.
question.
Well, she didn't
I
answer
didn't
the
ask
question.
a
She just want me to answer? Can I answer
No, I
anyway?
didn't
You
ask
may.
him a
Okay.
question.
Well, but she made a bunch of points. I get to answer them, right? First of all, I don't understand this thing with the. Let me tell you, we were just here. Maybe you weren't here. We were just talking about it. We did a peace deal with Azerbaijan and Armenia. We just signed the trip agreement yesterday, actually, or last week. We signed it. Last night I officialized it. That was diplomacy.
That's
We-
great,
we
but the Trump
prevented-
administration
well,
has still blown through
well,
more
when do I
money
get
in
to talk to
14
you? Do I get to
weeks
talk in
than
this
this
committee?
entire budget that
Senator
you're
Duckworth.
requesting.
Senator Duckworth, I'm going to let Senator Rubio reply to the statements that you made at his request.
Yeah, that's
But
different.
we've got a hard stop at 12:30.
Okay, but I know, but she said a lot of stuff. I get to
And-
answer some of it.
have
All right.
that.
So the first is the second is India-Pakistan. We ended that war. We were involved in helping broker that. Thailand, Cambodia. That's diplomacy. We've been very engaged in fact, as I sit here now speaking to you, I've got the Lebanese government and the Israeli government meeting at the State Department starting at 8:30 this morning for the fourth time after engaging last week at the military level. So we're carrying out now. We're carrying out diplomacy all over the world constantly and very successfully in many cases. Now let me make one more point that you raised about the budget request, guys. We understand how this process works. Okay, you guys understand. I know because I've been involved all the time. We OMB produces sort of timelines for every agency. We put forward a budget.
You agree that China is the greatest national security threat that we face. And one of the key reasons is their repeated threats to take control of Taiwan by force if necessary. And Taiwan, as we both know, is not just some faraway island. It produces 90% of the semiconductor chips critical to everything from F-35s to iPhones. And its geography makes it indispensable both to global commerce and military power. Do you agree with that?
To Taiwan? Yeah, it's not just strategically important in terms of where it's located. It also is the message that it sends to the world if something were to happen to it.
Agreed. That's why for decades, really with leadership from the Senate in a bipartisan way, we've provided arms to deter the PRC's potential military aggression. In fact, you introduced the Taiwan Peace Through Strength Act of 2023. In January, Congress pre-approved a $14 billion arms package for Taiwan. It's been 6 months. We haven't received a notification. Have you advised President Trump to proceed with this?
Yeah, it's under, but I don't know if you were here a moment ago when I discussed, we just did $11 billion in December, which was, I think, the largest sale in history. Certainly, I think it was more than the cumulative amount under the Biden administration. And I recall during 6 years of the Obama administration, there was zero gone to Taiwan. So some way you would argue that we're trying to make up ground.
So why hold off on it now?
Well, so the other 14 is being reviewed. It's under review. It hasn't been, I think it's been noticed, but it hasn't been reviewed. I mean, it hasn't been approved yet.
So
It's
here's
under
my
review under the
concern.
White House.
Mr. Secretary, my concern is that President Trump has said publicly that arms sales to Taipei are a great negotiating chip with China. And my concern at a time when the PRC has been far more aggressive than they were in previous years, centerline crossing, circumnavigation of Australia, aiding Iran and Russia in their war goals and aims, frankly, literally helping Iranians target U.S. service members. I respect the importance of our having an open negotiation and relationship with the PRC. But in the meetings you were in Beijing, did the president offer to condition arms sales to Taiwan in order to placate Xi Jinping?
Well, look, I'm not going to discuss what was the president's words in a meeting, and suffice it to say that that specific question you just asked, that's not the context in which the president has raised this in the past. When the president says it's a great negotiating thing, what he's really saying is it's because China, as you can imagine, always mentions this. Like this is a top priority for them. They are constantly talking about Taiwan arms sales, but that in no way is what is holding up our decision-making or the White House's decision-making. It is something the president will have to decide on the timing of when and how that is executed on. It's been approved by Congress. It's been noticed. The money's available. And as I said, we are just coming off the heels of a very large sale in December of last year. So there are a variety of reasons why these things don't happen immediately.
Well,
and,
I'll just assert, Mr. Secretary, that there is more reason than ever for the administration with congressional support to continue providing robust military capacity to Taiwan, given that the PRC is more and more regionally aggressive. You also introduced and passed legislation in 23 prohibiting any president from unilaterally withdrawing from NATO. I assume this was because you recognize that our alliances are a key advantage against Russia, against China, against other adversaries. Do you still consider Article 5 an unconditional commitment?
Yeah, so let me address that holistically if it's okay, because I think we have time to do it. First of all, you're right. I have throughout my entire career in the Senate and through much of my time now in this administration been a supporter of NATO. I see its utility. The key, and I'm just being honest with you when we talk about this, one of the key arguments that I would always use on behalf of NATO is the fact that it allows us basing rights that we could use in a contingency operation in a time of conflict and a time of need that we just have had. So when you have countries in this alliance, because understand at the end of the day, we are providing basically the defense backbone of an entire.
I want to ask you about Operation Southern Spear, the operation to strike boats in the Pacific and the Caribbean, that dozens of operations have now killed more than 200 people. Have you been involved as Secretary of State or National Security Advisor in discussion about the targeting criteria that are used to decide which boats we should strike?
No, but not because I've avoided it, but because those are largely legal decisions, right? So
but if you haven't been involved in discussion, as the National Security Advisor, are you aware of what the targeting criteria are?
Yeah, I mean, they go through so every strike has a legal officer on the deck that has to make a determination about whether the call is legal or not. And this is done by the Department of War, the way it's been done in other theaters around the world.
Here's what I want to ask you about. So you're generally aware of the targeting criteria. I'm not allowed. I know what the targeting criteria are because of briefings I've had in this committee and the Armed Services Committee. It's all been in classified. And I'm not allowed to discuss the targeting criteria because they've only been shared and classified. But I don't think I'm prohibited from describing things that aren't targeting criteria. So I'll give you an obvious example. Everyone on the boat is right-handed. That's not a targeting criteria. It would be ridiculous.
Everyone on the boat is what?
Everybody on the boat is right-handed. That's not a targeting criteria. It's obviously not a targeting criteria. It would be improper for it to be a targeting criteria. Here's one that's not so obvious and that surprised me. There's evidence of narcotics on the boat. That is not a targeting criteria. I have been briefed on Southern Spear since the first operation on September 2 and most recently within the last couple of weeks, and I've asked again and again, have the targeting criteria changed? No, they have not. What are their criteria? Here's what they are. I can't describe it here. But the presence of narcotics on the boat has never been a targeting criteria. Would you have any ability to explain? And the administration could have picked that as a targeting criteria. They chose items that were targets, that authorized the use of the U.S. military to sink boats and kill people. But they have not used the presence of narcotics on the boat as one of the targeting criteria. And I would suggest to my colleagues, if you go look at the individual files of all the strikes, and I've looked at the first 46, they are consistent with what I've just said about something that's not on the list of targeting criteria. Why would the administration not include the presence of narcotics on the boat as a targeting criteria in Operation Southern Spear?
As you just outlined, I can't discuss the specifics of the targeting criteria, but I can tell you the one thing that is obvious is that the targeting criteria is not single source. In essence, there are multiple checks.
There are three elements to the targeting criteria.
Right, and all of it informed and infused by intelligence collection. In essence, they have to have true links. I can tell you they do walk away from strikes. There are multiple times that I've been aware. I'm not aware of every strike because it's not reported on a regular basis. It's delegated. Yeah. But there have been strikes that they've walked away from because it doesn't meet the criteria or because there's doubts.
I'm not saying that the strikes that I've reviewed don't meet the targeting criteria, but I'm saying how odd it is, especially since the administration always announced this is against narco-traffickers. We've attacked narco-traffickers. How odd it is that the presence of narcotics on a boat is not one of the targeting criteria. And I would encourage my colleagues, get the same briefing I've gotten, take a look at the strike files. You'll be as surprised as I am. Here's the second question.